Hello, in this video, we will look at some questions and programs that are typically asked on Python queue data structure. Now, what is a queue? Queue is a linear data structure implemented in first in and first out or FIFO manner, which means insertion happens at rear end and deletion happens at front, like for an example, a queue at a bus stop or a bank. Now, what are the different operations we can perform on the queue? You could be asked questions to implement any of them in your exam. Let's look at all of them one by one. First is the Enqueue operation. Enqueue is nothing but inserting data in the queue. It adds data to the queue. As we just learned, we insert data at the back of the queue. Now you also need to know the term overflow, which refers to a situation which occurs when we try to insert an item into a queue which is full. This can occur if the size of the queue is fixed or there is no memory to allocate for new item. Next is Dequeue operation. Dequeue is delete operation. It deletes the element from the front of the queue. Now if the queue is empty and you still try to remove an item, then that situation is called as underflow. Next is peek. It refers to checking the front of the queue without removing it. It is also called as inspecting the queue. Next is isEmpty. The operation checks if the queue is empty. Next operation is display. It traverses the entire queue and prints all elements of the queue. Now the question you could be asked would be to implement any of these operations as per user choice. It could be that each node contains only one data element, let's say a number or name, or it could have multiple items in one node like student information or city with its pin code, etc. We will start with implementing queue of numbers, and in the end we will see how to change it to different data types. The way we will implement all of these operations is that we will write a function to implement each of them, and in our main program we will take user choice and accordingly call these functions. If you are asked to implement any two of these operations, then you can accordingly remove the remaining functions. Now let's start with writing the main function. We will create a loop where we will first write the main menu where user will select any of the queue operations. This loop will execute till user wishes to exit. Once we take an option from the user, we will put a if statement to call the queue function. In Python, we use list to implement queue, so we will declare a list variable for queue. We will first implement the Enqueue function. Let's write the declaration for it. Now in the program, since the queue is global, if you wish, you cannot pass it as a parameter. We will however pass it as a parameter, as typically all the questions ask us to do so. So this will take in the queue and also the item to be added. Now the list has a very useful function append. It automatically adds a new member to the end. So in this function, we will just call queue.append with the item. We will now go back to the main and add the code to call Enqueue function. We will write the code to take in a number from the user via the input command. Then we will call the Enqueue function with queue and item. Now we will implement the Dequeue function. Let's write the declaration for it. It will take in the queue. Inside the function, we will check if the queue is empty or not. If yes, then we have queue underflow condition and we will print it. Else we will use pop0 function of list to dequeue the first item. We can then either print the item or return it back from our function. We'll now go back to main and add the code to dequeue the first item. We take in the value returned by Dequeue here and print it here too. Now we will implement peek. Peek just shows the front item without removing it. Let's first write the declaration of the function. In a queue, the topmost item is the first item in the list, which is the element at 0 index. So we will first check if queue is empty. If yes, we will just print queue empty. Otherwise, we will print element at index 0. If the question has specified to return that value, we can return it too. Next, we will implement empty function. This function checks if the queue is empty or not. So in this function implementation, we will just put an if condition to check if queue is empty or not. If yes, we will print queue empty, otherwise print not empty. This function can return true or false also. We will now go back to the main and call this function as per the option returned by the user. Next, we will implement the display function. Now in display, you can at very basic level just call print the queue. This will print all the contents in the list. As typically the queue is huge, you can also print them one by one by iterating through them. We will call this function in main in display option. Now what if instead of number we have to save names? In this case, we have to change the input function in Enqueue. There is no other change in entire program as list can take in any data types. But what if we have to save multiple items like student data name, roll number, marks? Here also the change is only in the Enqueue operation. We will first take in the 3 values, then we will create the item node by creating a list of all the 3 values. Once we have created this node, again the program does not need any other change and whole program will work with this list as individual item as nested list. Now you can try running this program, and if you are asked to implement any of these, you can just write those ones. If you want to solve more problems like this, you can visit my website for more Python program to practice on. Good luck.